Greetings and welcome. In this video, I seek to introduce to you the Booker Prize winning Indian collection of short stories. All the stories written by one author. Her name is BANO MUSHTAQ. BANO MUSHTAQ, a Kannada author. And the title of the award winning work is Heart Lamb. Heart Lamb. And this collection of 12 short stories is rendered into English or translated into English by Deepa Bhashti. Deepa Bhashti. As I said, it's a collection of 12 short stories, each as gripping, if not more gripping than the others. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that I've not read a collection of short stories in a long while, as gripping, as haunting, as profound in its theme, and as bold in its treatment as this collection of short stories by BANO MUSHTAQ is. And I am not surprised that it won the Booker Prize. Now, by the way, the Booker Prize is an annual literary award which carries a prize money of £50,000 sterling. Each pound sterling is, say, 100 rupees. So it's about 50 lakhs. And that money, or that prize of money, is to be shared equally between the author and the translator, in case the prize awarded is for a translated work, as it happens to be in the present case. Now, I'm not going to spend much time commenting on each of the 12 stories. If you ask me what is my favorite story, it would be difficult actually to name one because all of them are equally powerful. But I would perhaps mention Red Lungi. It has the background of circumcision and how the author treats this particular theme and brings in the contrast between two different classes of people within the same community, and how the same thing is experienced by people in two different sections of the society, are all very expertly done. It's difficult to improve on what BANO, the author, has done. Now, I would like to perhaps read out the title of the short stories. Let me see. Yes. Stone Slabs for Shaista Mahal is the opening story. Fire Rain, second one. Black Cobras, A Decision of the Heart. Red Lungi, Heart Lamb. It is from this story that the collection takes its name or title. High Heel Shoe, which is also an extremely gripping story. Soft Whispers, A Taste of Heaven, The Shroud, The Arabic Teacher and Gobi Manchuri, and the last one, Be a Woman Once, O Lord, which of course indicates the lawyer's feminist signature. So these are the 12 stories, and the collection carries a very competent introduction by the translator. Now, I would like to read out the first paragraph from the translator's note. That will give you some idea about the author, and I would like to make some comments on that thereafter. BANO MUSHTAQ's entire career, be it as a writer or as a journalist, lawyer, and activist, can be summed up in one Kannada word, Bandaya. Bandaya. Now, unfortunately, I have no Kannada, not even a smattering of Kannada. Though I tried to learn Kannada when I was a small little boy, when I used to visit the tea estates on the northern borders of Kerala. So I learned only this much Kannada, Kannada Kotilva, Kannada Kotilva. So I still stand there, Kannada Kotilva. So the word Bandaya is not familiar to me, but fortunately the author, in this case the translator, explains to us what this word means. Bandaya means dissent, rebellion, protest, resistance to authority, revolution, and its adjacent ideas. Combine it with Sahitya, meaning literature, and we get the name of a short lived but highly influential literary movement in the Kannada language in the 1970s and 80s. Bandaya Sahitya started as an act of protest against the hegemony of upper caste and mostly male led writing that was then being published and celebrated. The movement urged women, Dalits, and other social and religious minorities to tell stories from within their own lived experiences and the Kannada they spoke. Of the many Kannadas that exist, theirs was dismissed as folksy, in contrast to the prestige dialect from the Mysuru region that remains most used in popular culture. There I stop, but it's a fairly detailed note by the translator, which I commend to all readers. Now, I have to say that the book is competently translated, though I wish the book had a better editor. Um, I was fortunate to have some very, very competent editors to work with, both in Oxford University Press and in Horseshoe, India, and of course, I shouldn't forget HarperCollins. So the three editors that I worked with were extremely competent people, and therefore, whatever um, linguistic monstrosities and errors that survive in my books are entirely due to my incompetence and not because of the uh, lack of skill on the part of my editors. Um, I wish this book had been better edited. Well, that doesn't actually detract from the literary value of the work. Now, why did I read out this particular paragraph from the translator's note? It is to bring home an important insight to my viewers. The author is a woman. And even today, in almost all societies in the world, in varying degrees, of course, women have to live and make their achievements against odds, and in many cases, overwhelming odds. And this applies not only to making achievements, literary or otherwise. Women are pitted against very serious handicaps in society. And the substance that the author deals with, that is BANO MUSHTAQ deals with in this collection of told short stories, is the plight of the Muslim woman who is subjected to unspeakable suffering, inequality, oppression, exploitation, helplessness, what have you. And it's incredible that this substratum of suffering still remains almost undiluted, untouched, even today. And when Bano writes about the predicament of these women, she does so in a state of complete imaginative identification with each of the characters she creates. At the same time, she gives to all her characters sufficient literary freedom to develop on their own. In other words, she doesn't commit the mistake that most, um, say, ideologically animated authors or polemical writers commit, namely, subjugating their characters to their ideological angst and denying them sufficient autonomy to develop on their own. Now, the remarkable achievement of the author is that she blends both her ideological and humanistic passion and her literary authenticity, her creative genius, which grants to all her characters the autonomy they need to develop on their own. This is a major subject in itself, but constraints of time do not allow me to go beyond what I have already stated. And anyone who reads the collection of this collection of short stories will be able to explore this idea further. But what I want to say now, based on this, is extremely important for everyone, not only to Muslim women, not only to Muslim community as a whole, but to humanity as a whole. That is, I attribute the remarkable brilliance of BANO MUSHTAQ as a writer of short stories to, and that's why I read the first paragraph of the translator's note, to her courage and willingness to be a rebel. Now, there are two types of rebels. The first category, which is more common, is the psychological rebel. That is, those who choose to be rebels, not because they are necessarily or particularly committed to an idealistic vision, or they have a commitment to values like justice, truth, compassion, etc. They are rebels because they just want to be rebels. They just want to rebel about everything. There is a story, for example, that the story is based on the assumption, the stereotypical assumption, that the Irish people are rebellious by nature. There is a story that a ship on board of which people from different nationalities were traveling, including the British, the the Scotch people, and the Irish, got wrecked. It suffered a shipwreck. And fortunately, all the passengers managed to swim to safety, but they landed themselves on an island. And they began to sort of make inquiries around to find out how the people were living and what were the local customs, and particularly how they were being governed. So, one of the questions they asked the local people was, "Do you have a government?" So they said, "Yes, we have a government." And then the man from the Englishman said, "Oh, then in that case, I would like to know how it works." But the Irish chap said, "Do you have a government? Then I'm against it. Do you have a government? Then I'm against it." So some people are like that. They have to be against everything. There are many people, not many, there are a few people in a temple of thoughts who think that I'm of that kind. I have nothing against it if they like to entertain that particular impression about me. I wish them well. And I'm not here to say who I am. It's entirely up to my viewers to decide in which category they should place me. So I have nothing more to say on that count. But there is a second category of rebels, and that is those who stand with humanity, those who are committed to certain fundamental values, and those who are impelled by a strong sense of compassion and commitment to justice. Their passion for justice, compassion and passion for justice. They cannot go along with the entrenched forces of a society which exploit others, which form and deform societies in order to maximize the interests of those who wield all the control mechanisms of a society. And whenever such a mechanism happens or remains in force, it will also create its own victims. The advantage of a few must always necessarily be secured by the disadvantage of many. The privilege of a few has to stand on the injustice and exploitation inflicted on the many. This is the universal pattern. There can be no change. There can be no exception to this rule. So the writer here, BANO MUSHTAQ, I'm glad to say, is a rebel of the second kind. Unfortunately, the translator's note doesn't make it very clear. That's why I thought I would offer this explanation to my viewers. It's of no use to BANO MUSHTAQ, but I thought this much clarity we should have on this aspect. Now, the third thing I want to say is this, and it's because she was a rebel that her stories have acquired this kind of intensity. Because a rebel of the kind that I described, a rebel, one who happens to be a rebel, not by choice but by force of necessity, because she is so passionately committed to justice, equality, and the right of every human being to be treated humanely, she feels intensely for the subjects that she treats, and therefore her characters acquire an intensity which is otherwise impossible. That's the reason why every one of these 12 short stories is so gripping. In fact, you can't begin reading the book and put the book down. It's that fascinating a collection of short stories. Now, why do I refer to this aspect of the author's genius? It is because most people in this world are habituated to taking the line of least resistance or swimming with the tide uh, or floating with the tide like dead fish. Now, dead fish are dead fish. They don't experience the world around them. And therefore, even though they also experience traumas, difficult situations, they really do not try to go deep into the meaning of what they are experiencing. And therefore, even though they suffer, their suffering is actually wasted on them. Whereas people of the kind, the creative geniuses who necessarily become rebels, not because they want to be rebels, but because they cannot be rebels in the given context, they experience a tremendous awakening of, a tremendous firing up of their imagination. And their words have power, intensity. Their imagination is like a roaring furnace, which, by the way, was an interesting image during the Renaissance movement in the English literature. Romantic imagination as a roaring furnace, right? And that's the kind of experience that I underwent when I was reading this book. Now, why should we, who are not authors, or ordinary people, know this? We should know this because this will enable us to realize that we are not living our life. Or as T.S. Eliot says in one of his poetic drama, verse drama, Murder in the Cathedral, we are living and partly living. That's a very pathetic situation. And we are in this state because we have adopted the strategy of uh, adopting the line of least resistance or sticking to a comfort zone. Please remember that from the human point of view, our comfort zone is our burial ground. Do you want to come alive? Do you want to experience the vitality of life that's within you? Do you want to know the real raw experience of life? Then you have to have the courage to question the status quo. Not because you're a rebel, but because you sense that the status quo harbors serious, unacceptable, tragic forms of human oppression, avoidable suffering, and exploitation. And therefore, you who have a sense of identification or a sense of kinship with fellow human beings cannot look the other way. In this context, let me also make a reference to the Bible, in particular to the parable of the Good Samaritan, in which Jesus presents a priest. The priest comes across a man who has been a victim. He was attacked by the robbers, he was robbed and left there for dead, and he's bleeding to death. What does the priest do? He turns his face away from the suffering victim so that he does not have to reach out to him and offer him any help. Now, that is actually the option that most people adopt. And therefore, you don't expect any grandeur of personality from people of this kind, whether they are priests or lay people. So, my argument is that we do ourselves a great disservice by simply agreeing with everyone, cooperating with the forces of oppression, turning our eyes away from the victims of injustice and exploitation, and living as though we are blind, blind to the realities all around us. Now, in such a state, we simply do not grow, we simply languish, and gradually we shrivel. Therefore, the kind of cheapness of personality, the shallowness of personality, the pettiness that we find flourishing all around us should make us sit up and wonder. Therefore, I commend the reading of this book to all of you. It will challenge us at least to ask the question, am I dead or am I alive? In the book of Revelation, there is a church called Church of Sardis. Now, the message to that church, the Church of Sardis, is you have the name of being alive, but you are dead. You are dead. That's a condition in which most people are languishing. Now, the fourth and final point I make is this. There is a reason why every society bristles with injustice, oppression, suffering, and all kinds of rubs and thorns and thistles. Every human being is meant to experience these thorns and thistles. Every one of us is required by nature to run up against these odds, these dead walls that make our heads bleed when we batter our heads against them. There's a reason for it. And that reason is that that's the only condition in which some of our faculties will develop. Now, anthropologists will tell you that human beings have developed their peculiar abilities because of the difficulties that they encountered. So, from the birth of our species, from the emergence of our species up until now, human progress has been catalyzed or prompted or stimulated or compelled, if you like, by the difficulties that the members of our species have had to face. Even today, that's the case, and that law will never change. That's the reason why, by choosing to be in our comfort zones, we do ourselves a terrible disservice. You don't expect a woman who has lived selfishly in circumstances of comfort and privilege to produce a collection of short stories with the power and grandeur that BANO MUSHTAQ has done through this collection of short stories titled Heart Lamb. Heart Lamb. So, when we come across difficulties, when the going gets tough, when things don't work out the way we want, or when we come up against the deliberate malice and cruelty of others, or when we think that we are being victimized by the society or the systems to which we try to belong. And there are many who feel oppressed within their own homes. Very many. In fact, all the characters in BANO MUSHTAQ's stories are oppressed within their own homes. Domestic exploitation, violence, cruelty, injustice, etc. Then, obviously, this is something to be eradicated, there's no question about it. But at the same time, that's the ambivalence about the human situation, the paradox about the human condition. Even while we recognize this to be social evils, we also have to realize that they can also serve as a catalyst for our growth and empowerment. I have to say this in all honesty, that the greatest blessing in my life has been the difficult circumstances through which I grew up as a young boy. Tremendous pressures, tremendous difficulties. I don't want to go into the details of those experiences. So, to the encouragement of those who think that they have no tomorrow, to the encouragement of those who think that they have hit the dead end, the cul-de-sac of life, I would like to stand with BANO MUSHTAQ and say that these very difficulties can serve as the wind under your wings. Do not lose heart, do not give up, do not give in. fight the good fight. Yes, the odds are overwhelmingly stacked against you. But don't give up. Never give up. Never say die. Fight, fight, fight. You may not always succeed in a materialistic sense, but you will never be the loser, because the ultimate reward of your well-meaning, sacred, divine fight, I consider this fight the holiest of all. The fight against the odds that you face. The odds not of your choosing, but the odds that are stacked by other hands against you. The ultimate reward of your holy war against these odds is your personal growth, the beautiful, priceless, grand unfolding of your personality. And there are some such characters in the stories that BANO creates. So let me conclude by encouraging all of you to read this collection of short stories. The title is Heart Lamb, name of the author BANO MUSHTAQ. It's the the Booker Prize winning collection. It's not a small achievement, it's a global recognition, and a work done originally in Kannada but translated fairly competently into English. It's based on the English translation that the book has been awarded this very prestigious honor. So let me conclude here by thanking all of you for your patient attention. Thank you. And I congratulate the author and the translator for this tremendous contribution to our general stock of literary grandeur. Jai Hind.